Ukraine's offensive in Zaporizhzhia seems to be struggling, but Russian social media is buzzing with rumors that Ukraine has shown up in an unexpected location. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's August 8th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map, and you can see Ukrainian forces making probably some level of progress in the last 2 days outside of Robotyne. You can see here they're advancing, pushing Russians out of some of these windbreaks, even as Russian forces are advancing towards this roadway here to the north, right? You can see here's the 6th and here's today. So Russian forces making some advances here near Novoprokova, even as Ukrainian forces push them back south of Robotyne. So kind of a neutral trade-off, right? No net gain, right? Over near Staromayorsk, we can see that here's again the 6th, and you can see there's actually some considerable progress towards liberating Orozane. Again, here's the 6th. You can see this northern block of the town has at least become contested, as well as a large portion of these windbreaks to the north. So the pressure on Russian forces is again increasing quite a bit near Orozane. Again, in terms of total area liberated, it's not really that considerable. When we look over towards any other major changes, right, there really aren't. Novosibirsk remains contested back and forth by both sides. You can see here, right, this depicts Russian forces as making some limited advances in the area. Right, advancing, just gaining control of these last couple of blocks. But as you can see, again, this has been a pretty gradual effort over the last week. Russian forces, again, very much utilizing their one of their most common tactics, which they've certainly refined the ability to go block by block in a sort of high casualty, high attrition advance. But it's not clear where they would go from here, given that, again, they're going to have to come out of this dense urban area and then begin to fight in some of these narrow windbreaks where they've had a lot less success. And again, it seems to just be a small trade-off relative to the counterattack that Ukrainians have launched, again, pushing, I think we said, 2.5 kilometers into what was previously Russian-held territory. So overall, probably a net gain for Ukraine, but only marginally, right? And certainly Russia is active and continuing to push. When we look at the combat map, you can see that while Ukraine is reporting some of these tactical successes outside of Robotyne, again, this depicting a much larger area as contested. But you can see actually that the maps are starting to align, right? Previously, we had seen huge differences between the two, and we still kind of do. We see a few additional kilometers to the south here are reported as contested, whereas here they're reported as being firmly in Russian control. But what's more significant is when we look at Russian counterattack efforts, you can see that, yes, they're counterattacking outside of Robotyne, again, continuing to try to pin Ukrainian forces outside of Donetsk and to counterattack outside of Bakhmut. But they're also much more active than we've seen previously north of Setove. Again, trying to increase the pressure that they're putting on Ukrainian forces to the north. I think a lot of these are just trying to fix Ukrainian forces in locations, right, to prevent them from being diverted to areas where Russian forces might be being attrited and might be vulnerable to a large surge. Now, when we look over at Warmapper, this is where I thought things were pretty interesting. According to one social media Telegram post, and bear in mind, guys, this is an unverified social media Telegram post from War Translated, who generally do seem to have access to legitimate sources. He's reporting that Russians are quite worried about a Ukrainian bridgehead over the Dnieper, which is expanding while Russian reserves are being transferred out to stabilize the situation in Zaporizhzhia. According to this translated Telegram post, there is reportedly a withdrawal of combat-ready units from the VDV from Kherson and transferred to Zaporizhzhia. They report, again, a Russian source describes, quote, the enemy successfully entrenched on our bank of the Dnieper and occupied the settlement of Kozachi Laheri, and even already broke through the first line of our defense in that area, which for the most part consists of mobilized soldiers. Additionally, the enemy, Ukrainians, advanced 800 meters deep. They describe it as a bad trend, and if Ukrainians are able to transport vehicles across this bridgehead, then it would be, he says, quote, then it would be, quote, to put it mildly, bad. And let's see if we can find this Kozachi. All right, let's see. Kozachi. Let's take a look if we can find this. Kozachi Laheri in Kherson. All right, so this is reporting. All right, Kozachi Laheri, this seems very unlikely. This is extremely far into Kherson. There's almost no way that they're that deep. This is a dozen kilometers into Kherson. So, okay, I'm already a little skeptical that this is actually they maybe mean the Kozachi Laheri front or Kozachi Laheri area. Sometimes it seems like Russian forces will describe a frontline location by its nearest headquarters. That may be what we're seeing here. Oh, here we go. This is much more likely. There's the other Kozachi Laheri. Obviously, guys. So what makes this interesting, right? Well, one, as we see, this does not appear to be aligned with any particular bridge, which is very interesting. Normally, you would expect there to be some sort of pontoon bridge or some sort of bridge connecting across the Dnieper. But instead, we're seeing that Kozachi Laheri is not just occupied, right? But a few hundred meters have actually been liberated. So if this is true, right, here's the known Russian line. They say they're 800 meters in. So what we're talking about is probably about this deep right here. So that's a pretty significant beachhead. And as we've seen in an urban area, these beachheads can be very defensible, right? You get a couple of buildings, you fortify those buildings. It can be very, very tough to dislodge them. If this is true, this could be a considerable problem for Russian forces. Now, it's really hard to resupply forces across these sort of bridgeheads. But opening up this front, if it's true, could really make a difference for Ukraine, simply because, again, as we've seen in these tweets, it seems like they're already sort of robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. They're pulling combat units out of the area. And you can see here, again, a translated post from Russian social media describes today that there are Ukrainian forces on the left. This is northern edge of the settlement. The site was handed over to mobilized troops transitioning from the VDV, right, which is Russia's elite airborne units. And it says that in the area of the settlement, there is a convenient area that can be used by the enemy for transfer of forces and equipment. The settlement is located on the shortest leg for cutting the E58 route. So this is really interesting. And yep, this makes me think this is exactly where it is. So here is this E58 route, I suspect you can see. And cutting this off, you can see this E58 route runs directly into Zaporizhzhia, directly to Melitopol. And this would align with known Ukrainian strategies to disrupt Russian logistics efforts. So being able to cut off a major logistics point transiting from Kherson to Melitopol and in turn supplying the larger Zaporizhzhia front lines would be pretty important for Ukrainian forces. But more important than that, I would say, is the idea of opening another front targeting some of Russia's most experienced and deprioritized troops, right? Russia does a good job of using its forces and surging them where combat is most likely. Watch these Russian units' deployment locations as they change over 48 hours. Watch as they're fighting the advance from the north, and that they quickly pivot a number of units to resist Ukrainian forces as they push eastward. So Russia definitely has a good playbook of using the forces it has and sticking them in different spots to help stabilize these front lines. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you for now. Again, we'll hopefully tomorrow have some real updates. If you're interested in supporting the channel and getting access to the uncensored combat videos, the kind that YouTube won't let me show you, you want to become a member of combatvetnews.com. There we go. Any one of those tiers will get you access to the exclusive members only videos. And our last video we checked out was pretty wild. It was trench clearing videos showing a Ukrainian squad looting Russian weapons and using them against the Russians. It's just some wild stuff. And it really gives us insight we can't get anywhere else. So if you're interested, check it out, combatvetnews.com. Link is in the description. Thanks again to all of our members of Combat Vet News, especially our Colonel tier members and our Lieutenant tier members. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.